Hello. Let's put on the Discord announcement. Oh, that is up. Oh, I might need to turn down this music. It is very loud. Turn this. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, that should be good. I will. Let's fade over. Ugh. This week has felt so long. I don't know if you felt that way, Tojo, but it's been a very long week. Hey Raimi, hey Prodigy. Move this mic. I'll put my cat on the mic. I need to... Hold on. Okay, now it's actually facing me. Ghosted on a job offer? Oh. It always... I don't know. I feel like it should be... like... the least they could do is give you an automatic rejection, but... I don't know. Ghosting seems very common. Welcome, you've caught it alive. Hey Moody. Hey Gabby. Anything fun? I can't think of it. I mean, like, I tried some of the places, some new, like, restaurants where I live, close to where I live. They weren't, like, blow me out of the water good, but it was the first time I've ever tried dipping ramen. And that was actually really good. Again, not like the most stellar experience, because I think the first time I had it was really warm, and then the second time I had it was kind of cold. So it made it like a little less good. It's actually pretty clean. I mean, you know, you have to keep the bowls close to each other, but it's really good, especially if the in-house broth that they have is like very flavorful and concentrated. So it was, you know, I took Gary there after I went there once with a couple friends, and we had a pretty good lunch. And we live so close now to like so many good places to eat, and we just don't go out that often. So definitely need to do that more often. But Tsukumen, yeah. Hey, Brenoitalo? Brenoitalo? I don't know how I'm gonna say your name. Hello. Commission-free streamer? I know, we're done! We're done, guys! We're free! Which is crazy. I feel like I don't remember what streams were like before we started doing commissions. It feels so long ago. Because it kind of was. But we're here. It's a new era. We're in a new era of the stream, which is pretty exciting. Any tips on picking colors? So I'm not someone who like has a very easy time picking colors. So the way that I pick colors is often by gut instinct and like kind of based on experience of like what colors I know tend to go together pretty well. But the way I usually start a lot of my color palettes, which is just a general rule, it's not what I do for everything, is I will take one overall color that I want this character thing to be. I'm talking about characters because I draw characters for most of the things that I like. I don't know. Characters are my main thing. So, I pick like a general overall color that I want the character to predominantly be, and then I will pick colors either in a similar family of like warms or cools or right next to it, you know. So like say if it's green but I want a warmer palette, I might choose like closer to the like yellowish or maybe like a little bit of a warmer orange tone to complement it. I'll make sure to pick like spring greens as opposed to like deep emeralds. And you know, vice versa. If I want it to be cooler toned, I'll have like purples and blues instead, definitely having the base tone of it be far more like cool undertones. And then I'll choose secondary kind of color reads as being desaturated colors around that like overall family. So maybe it'll be like a brighter teal. Well, then I'll pick like a desaturated darker blue. Maybe I'll pick like a desaturated but lighter toned purple, or maybe a stronger, darker mid-tone purple, but it's still more saturated. And I'll just play around with that and see like what gives me the right tone, what gives me the right like shape breakup and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll usually pick one color that, or one or two colors, mainly one, that I will use as sort of like that bright focal point kind of pop of color that's sort of in opposition to all the colors I've picked so far. And with like a green palette, that's cool tone, that could be like an orange, right? With like, you know, I'm sure you've seen it, like color palettes with blue and white. Red is a great opposing highlight for it. That's why flags are that color. That's why, you know, you'll see some like ads that are like ultramarine blue and white, and they'll pick like a blood orange or a red to go along with it. Anything that's like going to be used in very small amounts and is this like bright eye-catching color will generally be that like third tertiary spot. And I build that first color palette and then I kind of play around with it afterwards, because I don't really come up with color palettes natively, so I tend to have to like just test it out. So I'll usually like set a bunch of colors down and I'll say like, no, I want this part to like really fade away, so I want it to be lower contrast here. So that means all of these colors, even if they are different, they should be similar in terms of color family. They should be a lot less contrasty, so their values are a lot closer together. Maybe they're more desaturated overall, they're less eye-catching. Same kind of logic if I'm doing the opposite, right? Like, oh, I want this area to be like very bright and eye-catching. Okay, well, so lighter colors against darker background, dark colors against a lighter background. Same thing with the whole, you know, picking things in the same color family. Well, maybe now I'll pick like opposing tones and really pop this area out with all the tool sets that I have, right? You know, I'll use that base color palette that I had made to help me inform all those decisions. And by the end, like, I might end up with colors that I definitely didn't like start with, but as long as it kind of helps you get there, I think it's fine to just kind of wing it and just sort of like brute force your way through it, because I definitely do not have it in me to invent color palettes on the fly. It's definitely not something I'm very comfortable doing. I don't really have an eye for color either. So sometimes I'll find color palettes just by like putting filters on it and realizing like, oh, you know, maybe in this piece, for example, like instead of white, it'll be this like darker gray. And that's actually really cool. So don't be afraid to use filters. They are very, very helpful for the very not color blind, but just the ones who struggle through making decisions like these. Hey, I don't know how to paint like latex stuff, if that's not apparent. I'm just kind of like making this up as I go. Did I go to an art school? Yes. You can find details of where I went to school before I dropped out below the video. How do you choose skin color? So skin color, I think has there's two ways that you can think about this. It has more subtle nuances and tones than you think, and it has less colors than you think. I think a lot of people will go into either like extreme of really not experimenting, or even kind of like trying to put a variety of tones and values into their faces when they're trying to paint any kind of skin tone. And at the same time will like way over exaggerate like the tones that are in the face, and they kind of end up with something that's like kind of muddy and a little bit confusing. So my general rule of thumb with any skin tone is to really focus on like areas where you place saturation, and areas where you focus on using desaturated tones, right? Make sure you keep an eye on your values. Especially with lighter skin tones, I find people are very skimpy on going pretty dark. And lighting will always have, whatever impact on skin tone, and you shouldn't be too afraid to put darker tones on lighter skin. You just have to be careful about how that is represented, right? By putting back kind of that subsurface hue and kind of like rosier like skin back into your shadows. But using, desaturated tones that aren't necessarily like super far away from your base skin color is going to help give the skin that you're painting variety without actually making it a whole different color. You don't actually want to move too far away from that wherever like your hue cube ends up. So like if I'm picking this color right here, like say if I do this skin tone, or well, I probably would go like slightly more warmer. Like say if I'm picking this skin tone right here, I might go kind of like anywhere in this hue cube. I generally stay above like the totally dark area, and I might make it slightly warmer, maybe slightly cooler depending on the lighting. But I only ever go like maybe this far away in terms of range. I don't ever go this far, don't ever go this far. You want to use grays, desaturated and saturated tones to help do a lot of this like contextual work, as opposed to actually moving your color around the wheel, because it's not actually different colors on your face unless the lighting is actually colored. It's more so that there is a kind of like a range of tones that you can find just in skin because of how slightly translucent it can be, or even how deeply pigmented it can be. And you want to play around with that by conveying it through placing colors next to each other and having that relationship be what describes the tone. So like placing like a desaturated gray next to red makes it look cooler, even though it's still desaturated, just gray. Likewise, the opposite is also true. Putting a cool tone, like color like blue next to a gray makes the gray look warmer. And so that context is what helps you create like dynamic tones in the skin without actually making like your shadows blue or your cheeks like super red. Right? So look at color from the context of like, I'm not moving this too far away from this base tone. I want to work with what I have. So how do I make the shadows look cooler? Move it closer to gray if your skin is warmer toned. How do I make it my colors are super muddy. Well, look at increasing saturation in certain areas, like in your shadows or in your highlights. Take into account what color the light is. If it's a warm tone light, then that'll change how your shadows look. Your shadows take on whatever ambient tone there is. So with those in mind, right, not moving too far away from your base color, utilizing saturation and desaturation as like tools for creating kind of that like diversity of tone in your skin, then it's really just looking at different types of skin tones and what their attributes are. Darker skin tends to really reflect pure values when it comes to like the light sources. So lighting darker skin, their highlights are very much influenced by whatever color the light shining on them is light colored or even toned or tinted. So it's good to use reference if you're not familiar with these things, because every kind of undertone has like a different reaction to different lighting schemes. But you know, it's important to use the range of colors that you have at any opportunity to like kind of that fullest potential, by being very careful about where you put your shadows, how dark you make your shadows, what tone they are, how you place your highlights, what color and tint the highlights are, and making sure your skin tones have that kind of diversity without going all around the color wheel just to make your shadows cooler or warmer or whatever. So color is all about context, and eventually you'll kind of find out, if you look at enough like kind of references for how different skin tones are lit and how they kind of reflect color and also hue and whatnot, you'll start to recognize like small like patterns in terms of where is desaturation usually found in skin. Usually under the eyes, your eye bags, right? Around your mouth, under the nose, pigmentation type stuff. And whereas, you know, normally warmer around the cheeks, around the nose, around the lips. So start learning those tricks. It becomes a lot easier to add that kind of life to skin without, again, literally taking yourself around the color wheel to make that happen. I feel like all of my answers today are gonna be super just like super disjointed, because like honestly this week has been kind of rough, and I have not been sleeping very much. But I wanted to stream regardless, so here we are. everyone who has joined. I think it was Umber, Young, No Variables, Nana, Spina, Santana. Welcome. It's okay. I mean, I like interacting, but just be warned. I don't think my brain is very coherent today. There is a question about art school. What are your thoughts on art school? I think it's good for some people and it is not helpful for others, right? And it's hard to know if it's going to be helpful for you before you go to one. But generally, like, I feel like if you're the kind of person that, generally feels that they're willing to put in the work and they want to, like, have control over their education and they're willing to kind of freeform it, it's not a bad idea to not have your education in art be standardized like going to an actual art school. But, you know, I personally think that my time at art school is very formative. It was formative for all the reasons that I needed it to be. So even though it wasn't necessarily like changing my life in terms of like technical skill, I felt like I grew a lot. I matured a lot as like a person, and it did prepare me, I think, to kind of approach my kind of professional future from like a more grounded perspective. I had teachers that actually worked in my field, and it was helpful, I think, for me to see that, to approach it from a much more nuanced perspective, because I was coming at it from, you know, the fact that I was just kind of an ex-illustrator who wanted to get into concept, and design is not something that you can just like sort of learn without intending to. It is very, I feel like it's a very like personal or purposeful thing that you have to decide you want to get into. And so it was very helpful for me to have like teachers that actually taught me to distinguish design as something separate from what I had always assumed it was, which was just like, oh, good art. Which it is and also isn't. So personally, I found it very, very helpful. That being said, it is absolutely sometimes not worth the money. I'd say the reason why I dropped out eventually was because I also got to a point where it was starting to not be worth the tuition. And so I decided, instead of sticking out the rest of my college career, kind of just like doing my assignments and having that take away time from my actual day job, which I was already working at the time, I was just going to focus on the job that it was going to prepare me for, which was like all my freelance work. So I made the choice to not return to my school, and I do not regret that decision, just as I do not regret going to school. I think it really is a matter of luck about going to a school that has teachers that you can respect, that you can kind of understand from a deeper perspective, in terms of not just, this is a person that is giving me stuff to do with my time, and then outside of school I am, you know, doing other stuff. It's realizing like why the curriculum is set up this way, where it fails but where it succeeds as well. Understanding the point behind your assignments and not just treating all of it as like busy work that is just there to hold you over until you're ready to really take it seriously and do it for real, you know? Because I feel like a lot of students at my school, they had this kind of, I guess, perspective of, I'll take this seriously once it's like an actual job. But then they never learned how to take it seriously. They never had their work seriously critiqued. And so they always felt like art school wasn't giving them anything, that they weren't learning anything, but they also weren't like doing their work or present for critiques or you know, giving the teacher the effort that would have helped them get the feedback that they needed. So it's kind of like a two-way street, right? You need to find teachers that can give you, that you can respect, that can give you that sort of support, and then you also need to personally be present and give like your teachers that kind of respect and time, if as long as they deserve it, right? Because some teachers are wilding out and don't deserve it at all. So it's a mixed bag. I totally understand why people don't go. And I think in some cases it's better to not, if you know that you are someone who would much rather have that control over your education. But, you know, for some people like me, I do not regret the money I paid or the time that I spent, but happy to know I'm finished. I forgot that's something that people do. It's always chocolate, though. Chocolate's disgusting. You know, just haven't been woken up to the truth, okay? You can't believe this every time that I talk about it. Nah. Y'all just lying to yourselves. I can't believe this propaganda that I'm hearing. This propaganda for chocolate. I can assure you nothing will convince me because it doesn't taste very good. Gummies? Chocolate gummies? Or are you just talking about gummies in general? Gummies in general are fine. Yeah, honestly, I haven't eaten like that many sweets lately. Should put more of this in shadow. I wouldn't have to paint all this stuff. Tips for the midsection when doing the torso? I'm unsure. Let me see. Do you mean like... You mean like the whole midsection? Like I'm not sure like what you mean in particular. Tips for the midsection when doing the torso? The only real maybe abs specifically between the pelvis and the ribs instead of obliques. Obliques in particular. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, so I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that like the distance between the rib cage and the pelvis is not really that big. I think you can describe it as like a fist's distance, right? So you can fit like a fist in here, basically. And when it comes to drawing like muscles on here, As long as you get that proportion in, everything else kind of just lines up with itself. So if you have, say, the abdominal muscles, they'll kind of line up with this kind of like the top like pelvic crest, and like slightly protrude out right above the crest itself, because then you'll have the actual hip with like the great trochanter and everything happening down here. So when it comes to like actually drawing this section, I guess it's kind of like if you just imagine a kind of like, oh, it's hard to explain. I've always imagined it as like a little kind of like fat pouch right above that follows the crest of the pelvis. So whenever I'm drawing it, when I'm drawing like something else, for example, I've got the torso. As long as I know where this like pelvis kind of is, right? And I know that there is where that kind of top edge of that pelvis is, I can always kind of just rest this little pouch above it. Obliques are not super obvious on most people. They kind of just are a very subtle thing. If it's not a super toned body. But I try to like line them up with the abdominal muscles and kind of have them follow the curve of that pelvic crest. And I don't really think much of it beyond that. If I'm still making the ribs and pelvis too short, yeah, I guess like if you notice, like, here's like the true brute force way. Like, if you notice that you tend to make certain things longer or shorter, the easiest way is just to like kind of actively train yourself to after you like draw those two things, to sort of like take a step back and evaluate like the length and knowing your own habits, because I always tend to draw heads too big. And the only way that I fix that is by like just brute forcing it every time I draw a head, and always sizing it down as soon as I get to the torso. I kind of just remember that that's like a habit that I have. And eventually, once you've like kept that aspect of your kind of like muscle memory, and you keep pointing it out to yourself, eventually you'll start to notice that your first instinct is going to take on the attributes of like your new kind of focus, which is making the ribs and the pelvis longer than you feel inclined to do them from the beginning. But again, the easiest way for me to kind of properly set their proportion is to have again practiced over and over again and trying to like really drill into my brain that like because I used to make this the distance between the rib cage and the pelvis way too long. I used to make that like huge. And it took actively like raising the pelvis bit by bit and feeling very wrong about it until I realized like, no, this is like really what should be the distance between the two. And then now I draw that distance by instinct because I've spent the time to sit down with myself and be like, okay, this is like, you know, a consistent habit that I have. This is, like a, I don't know, something that I can start to fix just by sort of revising that bit right after you draw it, and then like really looking at it and internalizing that this should be the new normal. This should be the new habit that you have. And eventually, like, I think you'll just start to get used to the distance, the more you reinforce that for yourself. Because, like, proportion is kind of just a matter of constantly re-engaging with the same set of distances. And then eventually you'll realize like, oh, I always tend to get this wrong. Like, this is my habit. I tend to draw my heads too big. I tend to draw my legs too long. It's noticing that that's a habit that you have that is the hardest part. Once you know that, actually fixing it is not that hard. But honestly, like, I feel like with obliques, the only thing I really can say is that once you've gotten used to the real kind of like distance between the two, the obliques are not really the problem. It's really like getting that proportion to each other. I think some people say that pelvises are like maybe like a third or almost half of the size of a rib cage in terms of like length. So you have like rib cage, pelvis being proportional to each other, and then you have the distance of like a fist. Like if you like actually put your hand underneath your ribs, you'll kind of feel that the pelvis hits your pinky. So if that's kind of the bigger problem, I'd say like getting that proportion is probably going to help you a lot more than tips on drawing the obliques, because they're not necessarily too complicated once that proportion is in place. I think the only thing that really happens is people emphasize it way too much sometimes. They're not really that massive. And it's usually better to like de-emphasize obliques, but emphasize like the silhouette break that goes from oblique to its attachment to the crest of the pelvis, and then that going into like I think the iliotibial band and then the tensor fasciae lata like on the side of the hip, with all of the muscles that attach to those same areas from the leg. Like, that connection point is far more crucial than actually emphasizing the obliques, even on someone who's like super muscular. Getting that attachment to the pelvic crest, getting that kind of like V that people always see on people, the V, not of the abs, but of the actual hips themselves, right? That V. Once you get that, like, it's not obliques are not super complicated, but people tend to make them really wide, so it almost kind of looks like a third hip element, but that's not really like what they're but they're 4. I don't know if that was helpful. Hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, proportions are hard. Like, I'd say don't get too beat up about not getting your proportions right. It's really something that you develop slowly, because not only is it a matter of like learning your foundations, it's also a matter of taste. You'll learn how long you like your characters to, like, their arms to be or their legs to be. You'll learn how tall you want them to be. Like, all my characters are all 8 heads tall, but I meet plenty of artists who draw their characters 9 heads tall, and that difference is huge. Proportionally, drawing at 9 heads is really, really bad for me. Like, I fight against it tooth and nail. I hate drawing 9 head tall characters, but for some people that's like the average, right? You'll learn your favorite set of proportions, and that's going to come from, again, personal taste is going to come from muscle memory. And if you're noticing that you do certain things pretty often that you don't want to keep doing, that's a really good sign, because you're already noticing that these are habits that you have that you can then actively start to pull yourself away from. The only way that you can do it, though, is to keep kind of cementing that, like, knowledge or that note or that kind of fragment of thought, where it's like you finish drawing the initial sketch or guideline for, you know, a new character or whatever, and you think, oh right, I have a thing about drawing, you know, my torso too small or too short or whatever. I'm gonna lengthen that a little bit and just see, like, you know, if that helps. And then you're like, okay, I really liked the length of this, I really like the proportion of it, so I'm gonna really try to, like, maintain this distance proportionally, you know, this torso to pelvis distance and size and height. And the more that you point out drawings that you've done where you've done that, like, proportional fidgeting, and you've kind of played with it a little bit, the more often you reinforce that specific set of distances, that specific set of, like, measurements and widths, the easier it'll be for you to kind of unconsciously later on just sort of put those down from like the get-go, versus having to, like, flip-flop between, oh well, you know, like, this is proportionally, like, or, like, by measurement wise, like, if I actually hand measured it myself, this is accurate, but I don't know, it feels wrong to me, like, all that kind of stuff. You'll get used to it. Do you have tips for drawing faces? I tried using guidelines, but I feel like the proportion's always off. It's part of the struggle with most when drawing people. Faces are hard. I feel like I've never been able to draw, like, a decent face when I've been overly focused on proportion. Because it's like, I feel like it kind of stiffens the face a lot. Not to say that it's not a good thing to be looking at and being aware of, because the face is a very complex kind of, like, piece of anatomy. But I think it's very normal for that to kind of be the consistent struggle. I honestly feel like as long as you understand that there are certain general guidelines for how far away things should be on a face, again, it's that idea of, like, fidgeting around with the proportion, right? Like, after you've drawn a face with guidelines and measurements, kind of just, like, play with the size and distances of things, right? It took me several years to realize that I draw my noses super short. And it always looked fine to me, but then, like, you know, I'd wait a couple months and I'm like, oh wait, actually, you know, that could be longer. Like, I could make it longer. And that's after years of me having done, like, a bunch of guideline drawings, tons of sketches, tons of, like, you know, studies and stuff like that. And so it might help just to kind of move different pieces around. It's easier in a digital circumstance where you can just like lasso something, transform tool it, and like try looking at a piece of reference like a portrait or something, and try to see like compare the sizes of the eyes to the nose to the mouth and all that kind of stuff. Really break it down, draw over it, and see, you know, how different proportions create dynamically different faces. And eventually I feel like you'll start to recognize very specific types of faces that you like aesthetically. And those can start being the jumping off point for you when you want to draw faces. Because I tend to draw like the same type of face, and I just have to be very purposeful about like, oh, I'm trying to draw different types of faces. But I always have that like baseline set of proportions that I've used for basically everything. And again, proportion is something that you kind of work on slowly. But I think especially with faces, it is really good to do both, you know, studies from actual real faces and photographs, and then also looking at how people stylize faces, especially if you're looking to do stylized work. Drawing stylized faces is a totally different battle. And definitely not easy to do if you're just studying from photos. So good to kind of look at a variety of pieces, a variety of like, you know, touch points, but also allow yourself the grace to not get it for a while, because I don't think it's very easy to get that kind of complex proportional relationship between like all the different facial features, until you're very comfortable with the fact that like faces are kind of just a combination of different relationships. Like bigger eyes in the context of this face shape changes the way it looks dynamically, and even a face that looks very proportionally off to you could actually be very realistic for someone. So you know, this is a case where using references and drawing on top of references will be very helpful. But like once you've gotten that base understanding of the relationships between things, like there's an eye width distance apart, the eyes, is it the nose or the eyes that are like right in the middle of the face? You've got 2.5 eyes, maybe, usually 2 eyes to distance to like the hairline. You've got like an eye and a half, 2 eyes down to the chin, I think, and then like a third of the way down is the middle of the, I don't know. So, you know, like all of these things, all of these relationships, once you have that, then it's a lot of just coming up with your very specific preference for how your faces, how you want your faces to look. Hello. Thank you, Brittle. Can you share a secret tip for drawing noses identical to the subject? I'm assuming you mean like identical to whatever reference you have. Drawing noses is kind of the same as anything else, like trying to get it proportionally accurate. It is all about proportion and relationships between things. It's the relationship between like how upturned it is from like the ball of the nose to the base of the nose, what that looks like at different angles, proportionally the wings of the nostril to the ball of the nose, how the bridge of the nose, how wide it is, how sharp it is. All these things are going to change all the small aspects of it, which is like the nose is probably the worst part to learn on a face because it's so anatomically complex, kind of in comparison to everything else, except for ears. I think ears and nose are very similar in that. So I don't really have anything to say in terms of just be very cognizant of like all of those different distances. Because, you know, if you can do maybe like actually like drawing on the reference is something I've always found very helpful. Actually drawing on the reference to compare widths and distances is probably about as close as you're gonna get to like getting the raw data on like how this nose can be replicated. But it is very much like learning where the nuances are, right? It's learning how upturned it is. It's learning how wide it is, how the nostrils flare, how it wraps around, how high it is in terms of the face, right? All of these things are going to change it incrementally. Getting any of these wrong will push it away. That's why like the kind of T-zone or triangle of the face, the eyes and the nose and the forehead are crucial to getting someone to look like themselves if you're trying to go for likeness, which I never do because I've never been able to do it before. I am terrible at getting the likeness. I can't draw a character multiple times. So maybe I'm not actually the best person to ask this question. Thank you. I'm glad that you're finding it helpful. Give me a second. Currently no. There is no way. My plan is that once my contract with them is up, I will be able to help anyone who purchased it at any point to have complete permanent access to those videos, because I don't have the ability to redistribute them right now. So all I can ask is that if you did enjoy the course, thank you very much for going through it. My hope is that by the time my contract expires, which will be in 2024, I will be able to take my class and be able to provide it to anyone who had purchased it for free permanently, so you have access to those videos again. But I currently can't do that. So all I can ask is that you please wait patiently. I would hate for you to purchase the class again just to watch those videos, because I think your original payment is more than enough. So all I can ask is that you wait until I can sort that out. That's my new job. What's my role on the team? I am a senior character concept art. Well, not character concept artist. I'm the senior concept artist on the team, but my main specialty is characters, obviously. So that's what I do, and it's been good. I really like my coworkers. I really like what I've been working on. It's been stressful, but I am very happy with all of the various parts, even though I'm very like very very stressed. So it's a good kind of stress, because you know, I think it's one thing to be stressed and not excited about what you're working on, and another thing to be stressed and excited. So costume design is a very complicated very complicated thing to get into. So it is unsurprising that you know, it's kind of something that you're struggling with, even though you have all these other foundational skills. Costume design is difficult because it wraps up a bunch of other things along with it. It's learning about kind of just the balance of costume, learning how to dress something. Is sort of like general fashion sense is a part of it. It's kind of being willing to learn a little bit about that like technical aspect to fashion, learning about construction, learning about ways that clothes are made. It's about learning and sourcing fashion to different eras and learning how to utilize that sort of research in your designs. It's knowing the fundamentals of design, understanding stuff like big, medium, and small shapes, and learning how to use, general design fundamentals alongside stylistic taste and preferences. So it's hard to say like what are tips for costume design, because really, truly, I think it should be a product of your own taste, a product of your own interests. And also a kind of culmination of many other different types of like technical knowledge, right? It's the product of how much you care to delve into what is essentially a whole nother field of design. Fashion is an entirely different, complex, kind of discipline, and costume design is an aspect in which our two fields overlap. I'd say if you're just starting out with costume design, you can start by taking very basic ideas of ensemble, or like general ensemble. So I use that word to describe like literally what someone's wearing, right? Look at it from the perspective of like, okay, so this character, like, what do they do? What kind of world do they live in? Like, all these things. Would that mean that, based on their job or where they live or how they live, would they wear a long t-shirt or long t-shirt, long sleeve, shirt, or would they wear like a short sleeve crop, or would they wear like a jacket with like a bunch of these things? Would they wear a robe? Would they wear armor? Start with basic logic to describe, like, if you were to dress up as this character based with all these like kind of logistical parameters, like how would you dress? Start from there. Then you can think about like, okay, well, you have to think about color a little bit, right? What kind of colors would this character choose, or what kind of colors do you think would work really well here? You don't have to start from like a logics-based way of thinking about this, but I just find that it's very easy to think about costume this way. Because, obviously there's an aspect of what's cool, what's interesting. I just want to draw a character wearing like, like a giant pirate hat, but have absolutely nothing piratey about them. Doesn't really matter, but, again, just starting, go with that logic, right? Based off of your experience with clothing and dressing yourself and fashion. And then you can kind of slowly expand by researching different types of clothes, researching different types of silhouettes, different types of fabrics, different types of textures. Historical fashion is a great way to just kind of familiarize yourself with the technology of fabric and general weaving and fabric making and cloth making. And then you'll slowly start to dive into other more abstract genres like fantasy or like horror or like, other types of design which reality doesn't necessarily convey. And then you can start mixing things together. Like, I want to mix a very extravagant like Victorian or maybe like Edwardian turn of a century like silhouette, but I want to give her diesel punk armor, right? And that's a very kind of more nuanced perspective on costume, because it's building on this like new knowledge that you have about like all these different ways that fabric and cloth and clothes work together. And so, again, I recommend starting from logic if it's really difficult for you to come up with just like assembling clothes. And then you can take inspiration from like all of your favorite, you know, characters or other shows or media that you like, and then you can learn from them, see how they've done it, and eventually get yourself towards that space of doing your own research, of learning your own types of, or doing your own research in terms of learning like historical time periods, reaching out to, maybe not even reaching out, but just like kind of expanding into other fields and other kinds of like, you know, disciplines when it comes to history or fashion, or even fashion history is like kind of the medium in between. And then, you know, there's your own imagination of what does fantasy look like. It doesn't have to be medieval knights and you know, high fantasy elves or magic or whatever. You don't have to look like a wizard from Harry Potter in order to be a wizard. There's so many other ways to be one. But it's just, again, mixing and reinterpreting the research that you've done, the knowledge that you have, the inspirations that you've grown up with. And then that kind of culminates into coming up with ensemble pieces that are reinventing ideas, that are introducing new directions that can still be considered like an archetype or a certain type of character in a certain type of world. You're offering new creative solutions to those problems. I think it all essentially starts from literally putting that initial ensemble together, and allowing that to help inform your future trajectory in terms of like, okay, now I've given him like a long sleeve shirt and pants. What does this say about him? Because that's all costume design really is. What do the clothes that I put on this character say about this character? And how do I make sure it says the right thing, right? So there's that. When you're studying historic fashion, what are you looking for when you're looking at a particular style of clothing, wear, and cloth? So I look at a couple of things. It depends really on like what's the interesting part of that piece. Because sometimes it's about the technology of it. But let's do something fun, right? Let's look at some Pinterest photos, okay? I'll just grab like a bunch of different boards and we'll just look at it. So let's see. I'll just grab something at some point. Let's look at my feminine fashion board. And let's look at, do we have any? I always like looking at avant-garde. Avant-garde's fun. This one's fun. Let's see. Well, I don't know. That one's kind of costume-y. Let's go back. There's also armor, because armor's always fun. Whether or not these are historically accurate is a different question, but we're not gonna think about it. Because I don't care to. I'm just gonna grab a bunch of random pieces, and then we're gonna look at them, and I'm gonna talk about why I look at them in a certain way. This one's fun. Ooh, Japanese street fashion's always cool. Oh, this is so cool. Fashion's so neat. Like, I feel like it's such a great way to just like open your mind to all the possibilities, because like this field has been growing and expanding, and they've done their own, like just crazy inventive interpretations of all of these like techniques and all these different styles throughout history. And I feel like people that work in concept just like don't take advantage of that. So yeah, let's look at some stuff. So like, even if I'm not looking at something historical, I think it's always fun to just look at what they've chosen to do with the various like technologies that have like culminated into this point, right? So like choosing very specific places to drape. I don't know, this isn't necessarily historical, but I think it is still indicative of like what we can look at when it comes to judging and evaluating costume and fashion simultaneously. So it's like choosing very specific places to drape fabric for what functional purpose, right? There's one thing about keeping yourself warm versus keeping yourself covered from like the sun, which can be very damaging. It's about trapping kind of that like warmth while also allowing air to circulate depending on what kind of fabric you're using. So I'm looking at the kinds of fabric, how much it folds will tell me the kind of weight of it. It'll tell me maybe a little bit about the feel of it and the utility of that type of fabric. I'm not at the point where I can look at a piece of fabric and know what type it is, but I'll know enough to recognize that this is like a type of weave that can be used in very specific circumstances. I'll match those circumstances with a type of temperature, maybe a certain region, a certain type of like technological advancement, a certain era, and then I can use that information in the future to kind of give context to other things. Like, oh, I want a character that lives in a very similar climate, a very similar kind of like living situation, a very similar kind of day-to-day like living. Then I can take that information and can come back with, okay, well, I know that they use this type of fabric here in this region in this time period. My character is at a similar level of technological revolution, so we could use the same kind of references there. It's looking at the shapes in which they've bound themselves as well. So like the idea of wrapping something around you to hold something is very telling, right? What we carry on ourselves are the absolute essentials. We aren't actively trying to carry things that are not necessary, usually. If we are carrying things that are unnecessary, that says a lot about us as well. So looking at how they choose to be utilitarian, or how functionality is approached in a certain space, is very interesting, because it tells you a lot about what they're able to accomplish, whether it's leatherworking, whether it's using very specific types of kind of like molded metal, if they have metal working at all, if there's any type of armor, if it's primarily fabric or cloth or again leather or hide. All of that says a lot. If they choose to treat that material as well, if they're able to dye it, if they're able to decorate it, the choice to decorate versus to be utilitarian about something is also a very telling aspect. And so just by looking at the fact that they've curved the way that they've cut this leather, whether for fashion or for utility, both are very interesting potential ideas for, okay, well, maybe just straight strips of leather aren't very comfortable to wear. Maybe you want something that conforms to the very soft curves of the body. That's why you would cut it in this very like specific shape, right? And then it hangs down a little bit, whether or not by choice or just by like physics, I don't know, but it's cool, right? That kind of little bit of detail. It's not just a flat rectangle like you might be inclined to draw. It's a deliberate choice to create this like curve to it. And then just any instance of like decorative thing, like putting beads on someone. is really cool, because then it shows you that like this culture is not necessarily focused too much on just functionality. It's not too focused on just creating this like utilitarian look, but is also interested in like showcasing some level of individuality. How a character chooses to showcase that is always a very important thing to keep in mind. So a bunch of shit is tied onto the belts. These belts are crazy colorful. These are like decorative choices, right? How they've chosen to fasten their sword, their weapon, to themselves, also very interesting. They've chosen not to fasten it to their belt, but around their shoulder. Not a very classical way for us, to see how that's done. Someone else on the other side has a cross shoulder thing. That's pretty cool. Again, that's a choice. Whether or not that's utilitarian, what does that offer you? Maybe they have a certain form of combat that wants them to have that extra utility of taking this off, maybe like slinging it around. Who knows, right? Maybe this is just a choice that they've made, but always an interesting thing nonetheless. Colors that they've picked, right, for decoration is also very good, because it tells you about environmental causes, things that they have in their environment or things that they've traded, prized colors to describe certain tones, moods. Maybe it's a spiritual thing, maybe it's a religious thing, or maybe it's just a matter of convenience. These are more common colors that they can use to decorate something, or it denotes, again, like an access to certain trade routes or whatnot. So colors are always very good, materials are always very good. The way that they utilize weapons, props, items is always very interesting as well. And again, all these elements of like, what do they choose to carve and put time into? What are crafts and what are things that are just straight up adapted without any kind of like additional touch-ups or additional like, work or labor. Labor is a very important thing to consider when it comes to historical garments, because labor is always the main exchange for wealth. Time and labor is usually what wealth buys, or it is an element of like, this is what they prioritize socially. So if you look at it from the perspective of armor, right, each cultural thing, each cultural like region have different approaches to armor that functionally try to they're all trying to protect their warriors in some capacity. How they approach it changes depending on what kind of materials they use, maybe even a more like kind of philosophical approach to what it means to be a warrior will change their kind of like overview of what it, like the colors, the dyes, the materials, what can they afford to take away from the general populace to prioritize for their active units, or even if they have just like mercenaries that they call upon once in a while, right? Do they source these themselves? Are they given to them as a uniform? That is always a good point to note down if you're looking at like actual combatants. So in this case, like, they have a lot of leather cloth like elements, right? I don't know the specific thing. I think this is considered brigandine, I think, because of the studded aspect to it. But there's a lot of like cloth elements, padded cloth as opposed to plate armor. It's not that they don't have metalworking, but they haven't gotten to the point where it's so precise and so kind of like exquisite that it's gone beyond decorative and has gone into functionality in like a utility perspective. It's not to say that we don't know if they're wearing metal plates, but they're definitely not to the point of having that be the outer layer, as opposed to having padded cloth and leather armor be kind of the primary way that they shield themselves. I mean, there's a lot of different dialogues about which is more useful, but the fact of the matter is different regions approach armor and have kind of gone through their history of warcraft differently. And so notating when, where metal has been used, how it's been crafted, how its, designs are have like evolved, right? Like each curve is very particularly mathematically been determined in order to maximize movement, in order to maximize mobility. And so, having armor conform to the body is not really the point. It's more so allowing a full range of movement, while also providing the maximum amount of like coverage. But granted, there are aspects to armor that you can't cover, like places like under the armpit. So what do? They create these little metal kind of shields right in that corner, so that at the very least you have a chance at not having that place be targeted, where it's very soft and squishy. And so, whenever you're looking at fashion, it gets a little difficult when it comes to like avant-garde, actual true fashion, but regardless, all of those things stand. As far as considering, like, why are they using this fabric? Why are they choosing to approach like functionality in this way? Where do they decorate? Where do they choose to keep it simple? Where are materials and labor and time focused? And how is that wielded when it comes to cultural, social identity? That can convey stuff like again, wealth, stuff like cultural connections. It can convey trade routes. It can convey access to goods, services, craftsmanship, mastery over certain things. The kind of like state of technology, the state of craft, is always very telling. So if you're looking at historical garments, knowing when it came from, where it came from is always very helpful. But regardless, it's always very helpful to know that these are things to look out for. So that when you're looking or praising any piece from history, you're trying to understand all of the different whys, all of the different hows. And it's not just, this is a silhouette that we use, right? It's not just like a visual thing. All of these were deliberate choices made by someone somewhere. The access to mass marketed or mass produced items is a relatively new concept. And so, especially with historical fashion, knowing who was able to own this piece, knowing how it was worn, all those things are data points that you can attach to different things, such as like different silhouettes, right? Only certain, it's not like people in like the Edwardian era couldn't afford to look and follow the same fashion trends, but they would have to adapt older pieces of clothing as opposed to buying new pieces of clothing if they weren't within that like wealthy percentage. So you'd see the fashion getting passed down from older or eldest kind of like child to the younger children, because it's much cheaper to adapt older clothing and older styles than it is to purchase new fabric to make more pieces of clothing, because at the time there was not such a thing as technological revolution to really have like free cheap access to like way too much cheap labor. So fast fashion is again like a pretty big sociocultural marker that we can kind of put on modern, clothing and fashion, but not something that we can put on as a label for any previous era. So again, labor, time, sourcing region, sourcing environment, sourcing like weather patterns, temperatures, just like day-to-day lifestyles and attaching that to like historical research and stuff is really helpful because it gives you context for things. It gives you context for why you would make certain choices given certain circumstances. And that is then easily translatable information once you reach like the like necessary need to like explain why certain things exist in your designs. Obviously not every design has to be explainable. You don't have to like defend it, but I think it's always good to think about design from the perspective of like you know, not everything is just because it's cool. Not everything is just because I can. It's always good to consider that soft why, that soft kind of like evolution of logic that just brings you back down to what essentially you know, gives you reason and rhyme and reason behind like the choices that you make. I think it's always good to at least approach some design that way, because it's always easy to let loose as opposed to grounding yourself. But I will also say, don't be too worried if you don't like care about historical fashion. It's fine if you don't care. I think it's very helpful to care, but it's also fine if you don't. How much do you draw in a day? Like, what's your drawing routine timetable? I draw for a living. I work in art. So I draw most of the day. And when I'm not drawing for work, I'm sometimes drawing for myself, but not necessarily. So you ask me for a timetable, I will just say most of the time I am drawing. Sometimes I am not, but generally I enjoy drawing quite a bit, so I will probably be drawing most of the time. I don't follow timetables, I don't follow schedules, way past doing that kind of stuff. Do I have a standing desk? I do. Would you say it's worth getting for as an artist? Look. Can you imagine yourself enjoying drawing while you're standing up? Some people say yes, some people say no. I don't find it super comfortable. And I spend most of my time drawing. So even though I have a standing desk, I only use it when I don't have to draw. If I'm just like watching a YouTube video, that's when I'd use it, as opposed to when I'm drawing, because I don't find it very comfortable. If you think you would find it comfortable to stand and draw at the same time, then a standing desk might actually be very good for you. I will say, the benefit of a standing desk is not to be standing, but to be moving. So like, usually when I'm using my standing desk, I'm like dancing a little bit. I'm like bouncing around. I'm like moving my body around. Because that's like the real benefit. It's not standing in place, because that actually does put a lot of like strain on your body to like be in that upright position all the time on your feet. That's why people have come up with like various accessories to standing desks, like having things that you stand on that kind of act as sort of like a core activator. You can kind of like roll around your feet on it, even though you're like trying to balance, and it like activates your muscles a little bit as opposed to just keeping you still. But yeah, I find that I don't use it very often because I'm usually drawing and I prefer to be sitting when I'm drawing. But it is very fun to have a standing desk. I don't think it's necessary. But, you know, if you think it'll help you, like, be more of an active artist, then sure. Do you have any useful tools you'd recommend, such as brushes or something else? I mean, brushes are always fun. I like experimenting with different brushes, trying out different brushes. Do I have any I recommend? I'd say take the time when you're not drawing to kind of just like shop around. I have been collecting brushes my whole life. I love collecting brushes. It's like my favorite thing. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars collectively on buying brush packs and stuff. And I've experimented a lot of different types of brushes so that I can have like a bunch of brushes that I really like. And that has helped me find like the ones that make me really comfortable or make me feel comfortable or fit my mood depending on the day, because I'm one of those people that it really does matter how it feels to draw in a program. So I'll put in the time to like figure that out for myself. So I don't really have any suggestions. Other than there are a lot of different types of brushes out there. Also, like, there are also extensions that people make sometimes. Those are always very fun. I use a script for having my lasso shapes in Photoshop fill automatically. I think if you just look up autofill lasso, there's like a blog post where someone's like hacking Photoshop or hacking art or something. Very helpful. I've downloaded that tool like many times. It's like a plugin that lets you, or a script that lets you kind of automatically fill whatever lasso shape you're using. Very helpful for like silhouettes and stuff, I've found. And you know, that's a cool tool. I've used other tools in the past that I no longer use anymore. I used to use Coloris or Cooleris, because at the time Photoshop did not have a color wheel. It just had like a really shitty Q cube. Loved Coloris for a long time. Was sad to no longer need it. Lazy Nezumi is a tool that you can also use if you want rulers or like a stabilizer, pen stabilizer for any program. Lazy Nezumi is a paid one, so that's nice. I have it. I don't use it very often, but very helpful when you're trying to like do stuff with rulers, because Photoshop doesn't have rulers. A program called PureRef, which I love. PureRef is a donationware program which you can use to assemble ref boards. You can not pay for it if you don't want to, but I always say please throw them a couple dollars if you can, because they have made a beautiful, beautiful tool. And it's a very pain-free way to collect all your reference, and you can put a lot of images on there before it does anything, it gets like laggy or anything, so I really like it. And it's my go-to ref board, basically, because you can write notes on it and stuff. The cube wheel versus triangle wheel, a subjective preference, or is there actually pros and cons to each? I've heard people say there are genuinely pros and cons. I don't really recognize it very often. So I don't really care. I will sometimes use the cube or the triangle depending on how I'm feeling. I think some people say that triangle wheel helps you pick more saturated tones. It's a lot more accurate value-wise, so if you ever do like a grayscale thing, I've heard some people say that it's a lot more value-friendly, because the way that the triangle works is that I think the most saturated color that you can get on the triangle will correlate or correspond with like the direct mid-tone of like the desaturated side of the triangle wheel. So it's like all of these tones are very much like horizontally correlating with what they would be on the scale. But I don't really care. Right? It's not that helpful to me that like that happens. But if you like it, if it's cool, then good for you. Any dream travel destinations in mind? Um, I would obviously love to go to Japan. I have always wanted to go to Japan. I feel like if you've ever loved anything Japanese in your life, you will want to go to Japan. I really want to go to Singapore. I think it'd be really fun. Singapore, Korea would be cool. I like, this is kind of more of a general thing. I would really love to go to like on a tour around Europe and just go to all like the big museums. Like I really want to go to the Alphonse Mucha Museum. There are several museums across Europe that I would love to go to. And yeah, I just want to like do like a tour around and just go to like a bunch of them all at once. In like a week, 2 weeks. I think it'd be really cool. But I'm not like a big travel person. I've never been able to like travel really. So the idea of traveling like doesn't even come up when I have like a break. So it was funny. I had like an extended break from work for a little bit, which is during September. And my a friend of mine was like, "Oh, so like are you going to travel at all?" And I'm like, no, I was just gonna like stay at home. But it was like a month long break. Like I could have gone somewhere if I wanted to, but it just doesn't occur to me that like I can travel during my breaks. Because I just never like grew up with traveling. My family never went on trips for when I was like, yeah, for when I remember. So now that I'm like older, I could always go somewhere, but I just never feel like it. So luckily my partner did grow up traveling a lot more than I did, and he really does enjoy it. So I'm hoping that maybe once we're feeling a little bit more comfortable, we will maybe go some places. I think it'd be really fun. But as it stands, those are kind of the places I don't want to go. Thoughts on using or learning a tablet without a screen? I think it's a great way to learn how to draw, because if you learn how to draw with a screen, I find it's probably difficult for you to go the other way. And I think tablets without a screen are really nice. I used a tablet without a screen for the longest time. The only reason why I'm not using one is because mine broke. And I think they're fantastic. They're cost efficient, they're travel friendly, and overall just really good tablets. You don't need a screen tablet if you can't afford one or don't have access to one. And yeah, I think they're just a solid style of drawing tablet. Wish I had my old Intuos, but it is sleeping now, resting in my closet, because it won't turn on. Yeah, if you're learning to use a tablet, like, don't beat yourself up too much about it. Like, it is not a very easy thing to get used to. And just kind of chip away at learning it, getting used to it. Eventually you'll start to hit a groove once you've used it for a while. I think it took me almost like 5 years to really get used to drawing on a tablet and like making stuff that I really liked. Because I'd use it like every single day, but I didn't like a lot of the things that I made. And then, like, 5 years, a couple years in, I'm like, oh, okay, like, that was actually kind of nice. And I draw very differently on my tablet than I do using, like, pen and pencil. So you'll just get used to it. And it's a good skill to have. Do I like what I did there? I don't think I do, actually. I'll take a break from this one. I do have a couple of Photoshop files that I loaded up, so maybe I'll paint some of those. Have you ever tried heavy paint? I have. I have not used it very often, but I have done it, or used it once before. I haven't been painting in a while, so it's kind of nice to get back into it. Yeah, I did all this in my free time because don't really have time to paint anymore. So but I haven't touched this in a while. This has been sitting in my folder for a hot minute. Thank you. It's my color wheel. Oh, it's down here. Thank you. I don't want to paint the trees. So I won't. And I probably will never. Thank you, Vangeli. quite a large file. Yeah, this is my my little blue-haired character thing. I don't know if I've the one where she's like got little elf ears and has blue hair. Just like my mech OC thing. I kept drawing her with like a lute, and this was just one of the drawings that I translated into a painting because I thought it was pretty nice. Like, I think if I were to take all this and make it into a group, like this was the original drawing that I did. Yeah, the druid. So this was the original drawing that I did like a while ago. I think back in September. And I was like, it's pretty nice. I could probably do something with it. And so I tried like giving it some general tones and colors. This took quite a while to arrive at like a color palette that I liked. And then I just started painting. Although I don't know. Oh, it's not gonna show, obviously. Then I started painting. I don't know where. There's one thing that wasn't turned on, but I don't really remember where that is. So sometimes find myself having the urge to apply light and dark with contrast, but forgot to put atmosphere in mind. Is that normal? Yeah, I'd say so. There's a lot of stuff to think about. hopefully I can finish this. I would like to finish it at some point. But I'm also kind of like trying to take my time. I don't want to rush it just to get it done, because I don't know, I feel like I've never really been able to make illustrations that I've really taken the time to work on and finish and slow down on. So now that I don't really work as an illustrator anymore, I think I'd like to put more effort into the paintings that I do. Now painting is gonna be my escape from work, because I don't get to paint very often at work. Maybe there's a slightly less intense brush somewhere. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think there was just like a time in my life where I felt like I really had to rush to get everything done. Not because it actually had to be done, but just because I felt like I shouldn't take too much time, and I was really obsessed with being like a faster artist. And then I just, you know, I realized at a certain point that I was a faster artist, but it made me a very like unempathetic artist. Like I was always going so fast trying to get things done that I never really took the time to like let my pieces kind of just simmer a little bit, give it time to soak and take some time away from it to come back. I'd always just finish it in one sitting and then it's done and it's over and then I move on to the next thing, and it has its merits, but I don't know, I never appreciated going slowly. I never appreciated taking my time or letting a piece just sort of exist for a little bit and then coming back and seeing all the ways that it can be better than maybe what I would have been able to do at the time. But I have time now to kind of do that with my paintings. I don't have to paint for work anymore. I can just kind of paint because I can. That's pretty exciting. Oh man, I wish I got a free drink. But I got boba that I paid for instead. Pet Peach. The peach will be pet. Whenever I find her, because she's not in this room. Yeah, she finally slept in one of the cat beds that I've had in my room ever since I moved in here, because like I already got rid of 2 of her cat beds. She just never used them. Luckily we put them out by like the kind of, so like LA has this thing where a bunch of houses will share like a back alley. So that's where like everyone parks, is in this like wide alley on the back of like a bunch of houses. So I put 2 of her like cat beds that she's never used back there, where we all like throw away our units like trash and stuff, and someone took them like within like 10 minutes. I didn't see them. I like walked back in the house to like go grab more trash. I came back, they were gone. I was like, holy shit. But it was great because I was like, I didn't want to throw that away. It felt like such a waste. But it was from a time when I thought Peach was going to be a normal cat, and she's not. And she doesn't use things that I buy her. She only uses trash. So she'll play with my hair tie, but not with the toy that I bought her. And she'll sleep in the cardboard box, but not the bed that I bought her. But earlier today, she's actually sleeping in the bed, and that was so exciting. Don't mind me asking, how do you pick the color palette and build the groundwork to start rendering? So I was more a mix of colors, gradients, and flats. Yeah, so, let's see. Let me see if I can remember what I was thinking with this one. There's a bunch of... This one took a while to figure out. I don't think I, like, knew how I wanted this to go. So, like, okay. So, look at this. Look at this. Ugly, ugly colors because I can't pick colors. I started with these colors, which I was like, these are her general local values, right? This is just who she is on a base color. And I threw on like a multiply layer that has this like kind of more turquoise sort of tone because I knew I wanted the water to be turquoise as opposed to like blue or just solid green. So I was like, okay, so ambient tone reflecting up to her would be this kind of bluish tone, but had no idea how to harmonize any of these colors. So I went in and I started warming up certain things, right, or cooling certain things. So I was like, okay, well, something that looks kind of nice is having like this sort of more purplish ambient tone to it. And then I tinted the background. I'm like, okay, no, this is starting to feel a lot more unified, right? Instead of a bunch of different colors everywhere, we're focusing just on that kind of like pink to blue to turquoise kind of like range. And then it became a matter of like balancing out values, right? Okay, I need her to be darker than the background. And I'll do a bunch of stuff like, I think, oh, this was a curve. No, I don't want that. I want the gradient map. So like this gradient map, which has like a bunch of just crazy colors on it. I'll do this because it kind of helps create like random interesting accidents. Grab it, please. And so I'll just like custom make like random colors, and I'll change these for each piece if I think like, oh, this could use a little bit more blue or a little bit more green or a little bit more pink. So I made this, and it uses the kind of value range of the current piece, and I think this goes from dark to light. So lighter colors will get a certain range of tones depending on how I lay out the gradient map. It's not interesting. Anyways, so this is like the gradient map that I used. And I will set that on, and I'll play through like a bunch of different layer styles, linear light, hard mix, color, like, you know, all of these things. And I'll just keep doing that for multiple like filters. I use gradient maps. I use color lookup. Color lookup looks great because it has like a bunch of default ones, and you can also get more. I just use the default ones because I can't be bothered to get more. But I'll use color lookup to just kind of play with a bunch of different filters because they're usually good. They're based off of like photography type filters. So you can kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like playing around with Instagram filters basically. And I just did that a bunch, kept doing that. And then I got here, which is a much like more muted, but definitely much more unified color palette. It has good values, right? She's darker than her background so that you can really focus on her as this foreground element. And I think the last thing I did was I made the line art warm toned so that it would be easier to paint it out while also using that red in certain areas to make it brighter. And this is typically what I do for everything because, again, I'm very bad at picking colors, so I kind of brute force my way into finding like a color palette that works. Another way that you can do it is actually just looking at photos or other art pieces that have color palettes that you like, blurring the shit out of them, right? Like Gaussian blur that whole piece, put in the background, and then use that as like the baseline for you to work off of. Really helps if you like the atmosphere of a existing piece but don't want to like literally take it value for value. Using it as like this backdrop to like then color pick from is actually pretty helpful, but didn't do that for this one. And then after that, I kind of just went to town like painting. I decided to make it wider as well. I wanted it to be a lot more of this like cinematic width. So I just started kind of, let's see, what's going on up here? Let's remove these. So I started with this. I just like duplicated the background on the sides. I think I was starting, oh yeah, I started with the face because I really wanted this very specific lighting on the face. And the hands. I remember being really proud of these hands. I was like, oh yes, this is how I'm gonna paint the rest of the painting, and then I didn't. But I really like these hands. And I think, oh, and then I just like made this more saturated up here, but that's not important. Started putting in, like my layers are a whole mess. I started putting in like bright saturated tones. I really ended up liking the, like how bright this was. And so I used this as the base for lighting and how I would basically create the highlights for this, because I really just liked the juxtaposition of this color with this desaturated tone. And I just kept going. I think I had an idea for like the sides of her where, you know, if it fades off into like this brightness, maybe it'd be nice if she had more like elements going from the foreground to the background and you could see that really dark shadow underneath, and that dark shadow would be this like teal tone. Haven't really explored that fully. I will later, probably never. This will never get done. But the idea is there, and I'll pick that up later. That's for future me to decide. And then, yeah, I just started, like, adding more values. This is my rendering layer that I've been on. I tend to just color on one layer if I can. But it's nice to keep all these things separate for a little bit, just because there's a lot of different thoughts happening. I'm not very clean. And, yeah, so, it's a lot of brute forcing again, like, but once I establish it after I've done like a bunch of filters, a bunch of different types of gradients, a bunch of different types of just like adjustment layers, once I've figured that out, then I will start painting. I won't start painting before then because I want to try to figure out as much of that like base color palette as possible before I start anything. But yeah, so that's kind of like how that is. And now I'm at the stage that is both relaxing and also incredibly frustrating. It's the most time consuming part, and I never have the patience for it. Ultimately, it's just lay down my local colors, add a multiply layer, and then just filter the shit out of it. Those are the steps. Once I'm happy with it, once I've found the color palette, I will then usually merge it all down and then just paint on top. But in this case, I just kept all the layers separate and then just kept working on top of it. But yeah, I try to figure out my color palette before I start painting, before I start finishing anything. It's a lot easier to be messy in that earlier stage than when you've done a bunch of like fine painting and now you have to like be very careful with all the details that you painted, and it's just a bigger pain than it's worth. So blend. You blending between colors or like, because there is a thing called blending options, I think. But I don't think that's what you want. Or are you talking about layer modes? Photoshop generally you so there's a couple different ways, right? You put one color down, you put another color down, and then you just kind of eye drop between the two. Another method is using the smudge tool. Oh god. Let me cancel that. I have a specific brush that I use with that, which has a jitter on it, which is up here. That is using a brush that has some scattering, some spacing, and you just blend it out really fast. And the other one is the mixer brush. This allows you to set a different type of brush as the kind of like texture, and then you can kind of swipe between the two. You can also pick up the actual like paint itself and paint with that. I find this is very helpful for clouds. If you've never tried this before, if you do, I think, let me see. If you do, yes, if you do, oh, this jitter is too much. And then you do this one. Something like that. I think if you do the mixer brush, go up to you can like make pretty three-dimensional looking shapes. Not the most accurate looking one, but it's pretty cool. But yeah, anyways. Mixer brush is the other option. And I think that's it, really. At least that I use. Excuse me. Is that turned on? Oh wait, shit. It is turned off. Sorry, this is the I had the script turned on where it can like autofill your lasso tool thing. And I forgot to turn it off, so let me do that. And just make sure that I did turn it off. Yes, I did. Can you explain different light source in this piece? There's one down here that's like bounce light. There's one up here that's like filtered sunlight. And then there's just whatever colors I want to put wherever. How much time does illustration like this takes? Oh. If I was like really trying to finish it, probably like I'd say probably anywhere from like 3 days to a week. But I've been working on this on and off for like 2 months now, I feel like. Gage, thank you for the raid. Hello, Crow. Welcome, welcome. You will hydrate. Kind of a random question, but do you think drawing the body before drawing on the clothes is necessary? I've been doing it for 5 years and I'm wondering if I'm wasting time or if I should just jump to it and not bother with drawing the parts that will be covered. Well, if it's helpful for you to draw the body before the clothes because drawing the clothes on top of the body helps you with structure, then you should. If you find that you can kind of draw the clothes without structure because you can kind of envision the body without it, then don't. I don't draw the body underneath clothes if I can kind of use my foundational knowledge and my experience drawing characters and drawing humans to kind of guess and understand where limbs will be and how far it'll extend. So I don't tend to draw the body underneath clothes if I feel fairly confident in drawing them accurately. If I didn't, then I would draw it underneath the clothes because you should use guidelines that are helpful for you. But again, if they are no longer helpful, you feel fairly confident without them, then don't use them. Because yes, they are kind of a waste of time. If they're an unnecessary step of the process, they're just doing because you got used to it. But guidelines are kind of a thing that you will fall back on at some point, so don't feel like once you've shed them, it means that you'll no longer use them. It just means that they're no longer useful. in this very specific instance. Happy to help. Like a Satelier? I think that's how you say your name. Thank you for the raid. I don't know. Because actually I've never done this before. So when I finish one, I will let you know. On her sleeves, they're in between magenta and red, and I have like one hot pink like right here, which I might use some places. Oh, on the back of the arm? Like these? Here, I'll just scroll. On these? Maybe this is the sleeve you mean. Do you have any good resource to learn more about clothing and fashion? Tried to find, but I just found one good YouTube channel that I liked. I watch like documentaries. I try to like find the origins of stuff I look at on Pinterest. Pinterest is good for finding new pieces, but not very good at sourcing them, so I try to source them myself if I can. There are also artists that have like repositories for that kind of stuff. I know that Tojo, you linked me to one recently, which is very good. I don't know. I tend to just kind of like slowly accumulate links to, or not even links, I don't really have links. I just kind of try to do like research projects where I'll try to look for like a new region or a new time period that I haven't really like done much in, and I'll make that kind of my focus for a little while. Or if I find like an interesting photo on Pinterest, I'll try to like research the origin, see if it's historically accurate or an extant garment, and then just kind of like take it from there. I'm not like a big true like history buff kind of person. I'm really bad at history. I find the logic of it interesting, so I struggle to learn the history, but I try to because it then helps me remember like all these different pieces of information. So I try nowadays to like purchase reference books, right? So Game of Thrones is actually a really decent reference book because it has really good close-ups of all of their garments, and a lot of them are handmade, hand-sewn on the top and then sewn by machine underneath. So all of the visible parts of a costume are all hand-sewn, which is very much like a traditional craft. So the Game of Thrones costume book is actually an excellent resource. But I also have like books that I've collected on textiles, jewelry. I have one that's like textiles of South Africa. like various regions within Africa. I have like gold jewelry and jewelry craft of the archipelago, which is Southeast Asian gold jewelry craft. And, you know, there are books like Before They Pass Away, I think, which is a collection, like a photography collection of a bunch of really obscure tribes and their like customs. And it's like a massive book that a photographer put together because it's like his life project. So, you know, there's a lot of various resources. Not all of it is very neatly put together or packaged together, and I don't really have like references or links to that kind of stuff. I just sort of find them as I need them. I'm like new to this as well. I didn't start caring about this stuff until like beginning of the pandemic, really. Current thoughts on AI art? I don't care for it. And I'm not necessarily afraid of it. Really funny. I was in a meeting the other day, and someone in the presence of me and my art director, straight up was like, "What are your thoughts on AI art, and how we could potentially implement it into our process to kind of augment or even like, you know, do the concept portion or whatever." And I'm like sitting there like, I don't, do you know who you're talking to? It was pristine. I love whenever someone like that like brings it up, because generally the people that I work with are not very like futurist in that way. So my art director tried to be polite and be like, "Oh, you know, like, you know, the general approaches, we're not considering it or whatever." And then he like DM'd me and was like, "Get that shit out of there," is what I wanted to say. Which I thought was hilarious. Because they always just like say it in just public. They're always just like, you know, "How do you feel about replacing your job?" It's like, I don't know if you would know this, but like, I like my job and what I have to do for it. I'm not trying to like force someone else or something else to do it for me. It's understandable in certain areas of automation, right? Like super heavy labor type disciplines. Like, I think it'd be really cool if tech art or animation could get some level of automation to help them, maybe in regards to like, if we could start developing like smart tools to help them with more technical things like retargeting animations and stuff like that. If we could do it smartly and learn and all that kind of stuff, that's cool, right? Because that's just like hours and hours of just pure labor, not necessarily creative work. Does the animator want that to be the case? I don't know. Ask them. if you ask me, I don't want someone or something else doing 100 concepts or 50,000 concepts or whatever, because that's not like valuable to me. It doesn't make my job easier. It makes it harder because now I have to look at all these things, and like most of them are not going to be valuable. So what's the point of me even bothering with it if I could have just done it myself and enjoyed the process, because this is what I like doing. So I always just find it super funny whenever they bring it up, because it's like, no, of course not. Like, what? Unlike you, I like my job. I like what I do on my job, so I'm doing it. I have a question. When the local color is bluish, how do you decide to warm it towards green, towards purple, or red? Keeping them desaturated. Local color is blue. Oh, so if you just like think about it, like generally if you move, my trick, it's not always accurate. My trick is if you move it towards, like, okay, if you look at this thing right here, if I'm trying to, if the local color is blue and I want to warm it up, I'm gonna go towards the warmer side of the spectrum. Now this is not a very good like metric for when the light is like not just ambiently warmer. If it's like actually a colored light, that's a totally different thing. I'm not very good at those. But generally my rule of thumb is just like move it closer to the cooler tone. Generally, like, I'll go the path of least resistance, right? A warmer version of this blue is over here. A cooler version of this blue is over here. So, if I want cooler toned light, I go over here. If I want warmer toned light, I go over here. And I pick a color that is reflecting the correct, like, saturation-desaturation relationship. There are tools that you can use. I forget what they're called. Let me check. I think it's called Color Constructor. Yeah. So there's this tool that this guy made. It's very useful. You basically, it's paid, by the way, but it's very useful. You basically select the light. So whatever color the light is supposed to be, whatever color maybe there's like ambient light, right? There's like fill light in the room or something. And this could be like secondary light source. And you select what the local color is for the object, and it will mathematically generate it for you. So it's very useful, especially if you're like me and you don't know how to do colors at all. I'll sometimes, I bought this like years ago. I'll use this sometimes, just help me figure out if I'm doing it right. So this is a very useful tool. It's called Color Constructor. And this guy has been updating it, I think, pretty recent, or not recently, but he's been updating it slowly. So it's all up to date. It's $7, super cheap. I would recommend it. If anyone wants to check it out, here is the link. I've used this once in a while. I haven't really like used it in a bit, but always good to have in the background if like you need the help. Unfortunately, actually now they've added a picker. There used to not be a picker, so you'd have to use like the little sliders, which I was really bad at. But now it seems pretty useful. It's got some more quality of life stuff. So yeah, give it a try. It's pretty cheap, $7. How do you practice drawing heads stylistically? When I try doing studies or sketches, they look more realistic than I want. Is it one-time pay? Yes. So style is stylistically the stylistic filter that you want to put over something. It's a very difficult thing to do without like, I think, a lot of purposeful or a lot of intent, because like not only are you competing against foundational skills, right? You've been trying to learn how to do things right, and now you suddenly have to learn how to break those rules. It's a very difficult transition to make. So this is the thing I think most people struggle with after they've done their whole like training with foundations, is to transition away from that realism thing. Predominantly has to do with proportion, right? So when your proportion is normalized to whatever is anatomically accurate, it's the opposite thing to do is to take certain things such as eyes. Stylistically, the current, I think, like mainstream thing to do is to make bigger eyes, smaller nose, small chin, big mouth, big lips, high cheekbones, high hairline. Like that's just kind of like the current ideal face, right? And that changes occasionally, but that's just kind of how people have chosen to kind of like stylize faces right now. Very Disney-esque, right? And so it's really a matter of learning the set of proportions that define a stylistic face. And on top of that, it's also kind of trying to figure out what is your taste when it comes to stylization. You might prefer to have smaller eyes just in general, but when you have smaller eyes, it kind of pushes you toward that realism side. So then it's deciding, okay, so maybe I make like take away some of the lines that I use to draw the face. The more lines you add to describe facial structure, the closer to realism it gets. Which is why people talk about shorthand, how you decide to convey an object. What lines you decide to put down is essentially how you choose to what kinds of shorthands you use to describe reality. And for like more stylistic faces, that could be like omitting nostrils, omitting eye bags, omitting wrinkles, omitting laugh lines. For some people, even just drawing the lips is too much, right? It's a little too realistic. For some people, even drawing the nostrils too realistic. For some people, they need to have the full like nose nostril thing. It's very important. They like that. But maybe they won't draw, like teeth, and they'll just draw like the kind of shape for like a white band in the mouth. Some people won't draw eye bags. Some people need or want to because it looks nice to them. And some people make eyes bigger, eyes smaller, eyes longer, wider, skinnier. Some people like putting a bunch of eyelashes. Some people rather not draw any. So again, it's a predominantly proportion, but it's also how you approach stylizing things, right? Clumping a bunch of hair together, like drawing eyelashes, like a bunch of them, is one thing. Choosing to draw one, right, is a choice that you're making to stylize this object in a very specific way. You're clumping all of these shapes together and you're choosing to describe them in like one solid object. Choices like that, on top of alternating the proportions a little bit, will push you further and further away from realism stuff. But it's a trial. Like I don't beat yourself up for struggling to do it. I have been struggling to like even my style is too realistic for some things. And I consider myself pretty stylized, but my proportions are fairly realistic. My body proportions and anatomy fairly realistic. I draw a lot of muscles. For some styles, that's way too close to realism. So, some people look at my art and say like, oh, that looks super anime, and then some people look at it and be like, that's not stylized enough. So it's really a matter of perspective, it's a matter of taste, and it's a matter of modulating proportion, simplifying shapes. What do you choose to take away or keep that's going to push it towards or away from realism. Maybe in the future, but I don't really have the time or the energy to do mentorships right now. Or the experience, really. I would much prefer to plan for those, and learn what makes a good mentor. But definitely someday. I think mentorships, honestly, are definitely my preferred format for education. And I would much rather do that than try to like create super generic content that will like kind of, you know, try to cater to everyone trying to learn something, just because I don't know. It always stressed me out thinking about like all the different nuances that some people would appreciate and some people wouldn't, and how like a lesson that is written or made with a certain type of language just like wouldn't make sense to someone. It always stressed me out trying to like write things that were generically relevant to a bunch of people. So honestly, whenever I decide to do it, mentorships are definitely something I'd be interested in doing. But not anytime soon for now. They will hydrate. Yeah, honestly, like, my streams are a good way to ask me things. Generally, like, most streams... Whoa. This music was popping for, like, 2 seconds and it freaked me out. Got very loud all of a sudden. I gotta turn that down. Where is it? But yeah, honestly, my streams are much easier for me to kind of like answer questions through because I don't know, it's like you have me for a couple hours, so you might as well just ask me questions, and if I can answer them, I will do my best to do so. So definitely ask them here, because I'm usually pretty busy with like my day job and stuff outside of streams, and I'm barely like online at all. Oh, hey, it's 10. I didn't even realize. Well, cool. Then I will end it here because I am pretty sleepy. But yeah, yeah, I'm really happy to be doing some more personal stuff because I definitely don't get any chance to do it during the week. So hopefully you guys are also enjoying it and I can do a bigger variety of art now that I'm not doing commissions anymore. But yeah, let me read the chat real quick before I say what I want to say. Weird question. When you are drawing and you're having pain in your wrist, is there a way for you to hold your pencil to avoid injuries but still have control over your line art? It's not really how you hold your pencil. It's more so taking the time to like shake out your hand, massage your wrist, maybe wear a wrist brace when you go to bed. If you're having pain in your wrist, that's more, I think, well, yeah, I mean, you know, roll your wrist around, like do your arm stretches, you know, be kind to your wrist. It's going under a lot of strain when you draw. I don't try not to grip it also, although that's more of a tendon thing. But yeah, I personally feel like if you're having pain in your arm or your wrist, it's less about how you're holding your pencil and more so like you're tensing too much and drawing for too long without relaxing. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. Sketchbook tour still pending. God, I haven't drawn my sketchbook in so long. At this point, like, I'll just take a tour of like a digital sketchbook or something. Does studying concept art help when simplifying an studying concept art help when simplifying an illustration of a scene? Honestly, I feel like illustrators do a pretty good job of that themselves. I don't think concept art necessarily helps with that because concept is not really focusing on that. Honestly, a lot of concepts are pretty complicated and over-rendered. So if you're doing an illustration, much better to look at photography, much better to look at actual illustrators. Do that, and not concepts. But, you know, there are concept pieces that are key art and illustrations, so those are still viable, but you know, concept is not trying to, oftentimes, is not trying to do the same thing that illustrations are trying to do. They're usually trying to showcase something, call out something very specific. They could be over-rendered because it's supposed to be production art. So, you know, play it by ear. Generally, I think illustrators have that handled way better than concept artists do, but that's my opinion. But yeah, so that's it for today. Thank you everyone so much for coming by. I don't think anything's happening next Friday, but I'll let you know if it does. But yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for being here for my first stream, just doing whatever. Hopefully you guys liked it, even though I know painting sometimes is not like a ton of stuff. Like, there's not a ton of progress that sometimes happens, but regardless, super happy that you guys were able to hang out with me today. Oh, Justice, thank you for the raid. I'm sorry, I'm just about to end stream. I'm so sorry. But yeah, and again, you know, like, if you want to ask me any questions, feel free to always drop by and do that. I'm sorry, Justice. Thank you so much for the raid. Wait, maybe we could raid someone. Hold on. Now that I've been given a raid, I think it's only right that I also raid someone else, and I haven't done that in a while, so let's try and do that. Please don't say anything. Ooh, okay. I was super afraid that there's gonna be really loud music. Let's raid someone then, because you were very kind, and I will do the same thing, although I don't know who. Oh, Rake streaming. I want to find like a smaller artist who's doing some stuff. Let's see. But yeah, if you're ever someone who like wants to, oh, let's do this person. They look pretty cool. Nebel Keru. I don't have my dashboard up, so I'm gonna have to do this in my hand. Where's my... Where's the raid button? Where's the raid button? Raid channel. But yeah, feel free to come by again and just like, wait, why can't I rate this person? Feel free to like save any questions that you have for me for the next time, which will be next Friday. And then we can always talk and discuss whatever you want. Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the text thing. I haven't done this, and Twitch doesn't seem to want to let me do it, so I am going to type their name. And yeah, tell them you like send them love from this channel to them. Their stuff looks pretty cute. And I will talk to you all next week, hopefully. Love you all so much. Take care of yourselves. And yeah, see you then.